Imagine a blue-collar farmhand, just dirt deeply embedded under his fingernails, and he's walking right into the heart of a wealthy capital city.
Oh, yeah. Completely out of his element.
Right. He marches past all these luxury estates, stands right in the shadow of the ruling elite, and proceeds to prove, with this terrifying mathematical certainty, that their entire economic system is a corrupt illusion.
And that it's about to totally collapse.
Exactly. And this isn't a appeal for some modern political thriller. This is actually a 2,800-year-old text called the Book of Amos.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. We are so thrilled you are joining us today.
We really are.
Our mission today is to explore this ancient Hebrew text, really unearthing what it reveals about human nature, societal breakdown, and, well, the mechanics of divine justice. Okay, let's unpack this. Who exactly is this farmhand, and what was going on in the world when he decided to crash the party?
Yeah, to truly grasp the shockwave this text sent through its original audience, you have to understand that this guy was an absolute outsider.
Like, he wasn't part of the system at all?
Not at all. Amos was not a politician. He had no royal blood. In fact, in chapter 1, and then again later in chapter 7, the text explicitly points out that he wasn't even a professional prophet.
Oh, wow. So he didn't go to, like, prophet school.
Right. He belonged to no religious guild. He was a herdman, a shepherd who also tended and dressed sycamore trees.
So a real working class guy.
Exactly. He came from this small, rugged town called Tekoa, which is located down in the southern kingdom of Judah. Yet his whole message was directed entirely at the very prosperous northern kingdom of Israel.
So he basically crosses the border.
He does, yeah.
He leaves his rural, agricultural life, walks into a foreign, bustling metropolis, and just starts delivering this massive geopolitical and economic warning.
And the timeline the text provides is very specific, too. Amos prophesied during the reigns of Uzziah, who was the king of Judah, and Jeroboam, the king of Israel.
Okay, so that sets the historical stage.
Right, but we are also told this happened 2 years before the earthquake.
Oh, an earthquake.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating detail because an earthquake is this sudden, violently destabilizing event.
Wow, yeah.
It perfectly mirrors the message he's about to deliver to a society that feels, incredibly stable and prosperous under King Jeroboam.
The audacity of it is just incredible. I mean, this guy from out of town, but what strikes me as brilliant is that he doesn't just kick the door down and immediately start screaming at the Israelites.
No, he's much smarter than that.
He really is. He uses a rhetorical strategy that is incredibly cunning. It's almost like a stand-up comedian who goes to a new city and starts their set by absolutely roasting all the rival towns nearby.
That is a great way to put it.
The local crowd is cheering, they are totally on board, and then suddenly, without any warning, the comedian turns the harshest, most brutal jokes directly onto the audience itself.
That is the perfect analogy for the first 2 chapters of this book. He really starts by pacing the perimeter.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how he goes around the map. Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, Ammon, and Moab, calling out horrific atrocities.
He's basically laying down the law for everyone.
Exactly. He's synthesizing a universal baseline of ethics. If you compare this to other ethical systems in the ancient Near East, he isn't listing minor infractions or weird religious rules.
Right.
He's indicting these nations for ancient war crimes.
Right.
He calls out Damascus for threshing the region of Gilead with sledges of iron.
Oh, man.
He condemns Gaza and Tyre for trafficking entire populations and delivering them into captivity. He blasts Ammon for ripping open pregnant women just to enlarge their borders.
It's just brutal stuff.
And Moab for boning the bones of Edom's king to lime.
When you put it like that, it's a horrifying list. It's genocide, human trafficking, extreme border violence.
Yeah, it's the worst of the worst.
So if you are an Israelite in the crowd listening to this guy from Tekoa, you are absolutely nodding along. You're saying, yes, Damascus is awful, Moab is barbaric. Get them, Amos.
Precisely. He is getting them to agree to a standard of justice. He establishes that certain acts of cruelty are just intolerable no matter who commits them.
It's a universal standard.
Right. But then the circle tightens. He pivots to Judah, his own home country, and condemns them for rejecting the law.
Uh-oh. Getting closer to home.
Yeah. And then finally the trap snaps shut. The ultimate target of this massive preamble is the very audience standing in front of him, Israel.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when the spotlight turns on Israel, the sins he calls out aren't the bloody, spectacular war crimes of their neighbors.
No, they're not.
He zeroes in on their everyday social structures. He points to deep systemic economic corruption. Now, to be clear for you listening, we aren't taking sides here or endorsing any modern political viewpoints.
Like, absolutely no.
We are just impartially reporting Amos's critique. But it is undeniably striking how this ancient text describes a type of human greed that, well, it transcends time entirely.
It really does. Amos completely subverts their expectations. The judgment he brings isn't primarily about them failing to perform their religious rituals correctly.
Which is what you'd expect a prophet to complain about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead, it's about human exploitation. It's about the absolute collapse of societal empathy. He uses this chilling imagery, saying that they sell the righteous for silver and the needy for a pair of shoes.
For a pair of shoes. I mean, let's translate that for the modern listener. That's like saying human lives are so undervalued that a corrupt system would trade a person's livelihood or their freedom for the cost of a cheap pair of sneakers.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the ultimate commodification of human beings.
And he digs into the psychology of this greed, too. He says the elites are panting after the dust of the earth on the head of the poor.
Panting after the dust.
Yeah, think about that image. It means they are so ravenous for wealth that they want to extract the very dirt that impoverished people use to mourn.
Yeah, wow. That is incredibly dark.
It is. And in Chapter 4, he uses extremely caustic language, addressing the wealthy women of the mountain of Samaria as the kind of Bashan, meaning the fat cows of Bashan.
Wait, he called the wealthy elite cows.
He did. He says they oppress the poor, crush the needy, and then turn around and command their lords to bring them wine to feast.
I mean, calling them cows is quite the insult for a prophet to hurl.
It definitely got their attention.
I bet. But it paints a vivid picture of this insulating luxury. When you are drinking fine wine on a mountain, you become literally and metaphorically blind to the suffering that built your estate.
Very true.
But how exactly were they pulling this off? Did Amos get into the mechanics of the corruption? Like, how were they rigging the system?
He absolutely did. In Chapter 8, he exposes the corrupt practices of the merchants. He describes how these merchants are outwardly pious. They observe the religious holidays and the Sabbath.
They show up to the temple.
Right. But internally, they are just impatient for the holy days to end so they can get back to selling grain. And when they do, they are making the ephah small and the shekel great.
Okay, wait. Explain the mechanics of that. What is an ephah and a shekel in this context?
Good question. So the ephah is the unit of volume. It's the amount of grain you are getting.
Okay, the product.
Yeah. And the shekel is the weight of silver. So the price you are paying.
Got it.
So they are shrinking the packaging and jacking up the price simultaneously.
Shrinkflation.
Exactly. It's a double inflation tactic, falsifying the balances of deceit.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they are selling the refuse of the wheat.
What does that mean?
Literally sweeping the dusty floor and mixing chaff in with the grain just to stretch their profits.
Wow. And the
Yeah.
insidious part about that kind of micro-corruption is who it hurts.
Absolutely.
If you're wealthy, a slight markup on grain doesn't ruin you. But if you are a daily laborer, living paycheck to paycheck, buying grain by the handful just to survive the day rigging the scales is a death sentence.
It really is.
It is structurally targeted at the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, Chapter 6 describes the oppressors lying on beds of ivory, eating choice calves out of the stall, inventing new instruments of music, and anointing themselves with the finest chief ointments.
Just totally lavish lifestyles.
Yeah. But as Amos notes, they are not grieved for the hurt of Joseph. They are totally insulated.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Amos is laying out a mathematical certainty. Because of this structural exploitation, judgment isn't just possible, it is inevitable.
It's locked in.
Yes. And he explains this inevitability in Chapter 3 through a series of rich, logical metaphors drawn from his life as a shepherd.
I was going to ask about that because the book is suddenly packed with imagery of lions and hunting. If the elites are so comfortable on their ivory beds, why should they care about the warnings of a rural shepherd? Like, why use these specific nature metaphors?
Because he is drawing on the brutal, everyday realities of the wilderness to explain the strict laws of cause and effect.
Okay, how so?
He asks a series of rhetorical questions. He says, "Will a lion roar in the forest when he hath no prey?" Meaning, a lion only lets out that specific, terrifying roar when it has already caught something. Then he asks, will a bird fall in a snare upon the earth where there is no lure for it? A trap doesn't snap shut magically. It snaps because something triggered the mechanism.
So he's saying to the elites, look at the physical world around you. Every single action has a tangible cause. Every sound has a source. You think your actions have no consequences.
Precisely. And the conclusion to this logic is absolute inevitability. He says, "The lion hath roared, who will not fear? The Lord God hath spoken, who can but prophesy?"
Wow.
God has seen the rigging of the scales, the selling out of the poor for shoes, and the roar of judgment has already started. The trap has been triggered. Amos is essentially saying, don't shoot the messenger, I'm just the guy reacting to the roar.
And the imagery he uses to describe the aftermath of that roar is devastating.
It is.
There's this one survival metaphor he uses that is incredibly visceral. He says it will be like a shepherd rescuing just 2 legs or a piece of an ear out of a lion's mouth.
Yeah, it's a very bleak image.
That's all that's going to be left of this wealthy society. It's a cinematic, brutal warning of how very few will survive the collapse.
And Amos continues to build on these highly visual, almost cinematic warnings as the book progresses. God gives him visions that carry deep structural meaning.
Right.
One of the most famous is the vision of the plumb line in chapter 7.
Oh, yeah. For those who might not know, a plumb line is basically a string with a heavy lead weight at the bottom. Builders use it to see if a wall is perfectly straight, right? Because gravity pulls the string in a perfect vertical line.
Exactly. Gravity doesn't lie.
Right. Huh?
In the vision, God is standing beside a wall with his plumb line in his hand. The plumb line represents the absolute standard of true justice.
Okay.
The implication is that the wall, which is the society of Israel, has been measured against this objective standard, and it is fundamentally internally crooked.
Let me push back on that for a second, though. If you asked the elites of Samaria, they probably thought their wall was perfectly straight.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
They had a booming economy, expanding borders, and massive estates. How does a society blind itself so completely to its own crookedness?
Well, a crooked wall could look fine to the naked eye for a while, especially if it's painted and decorated nicely.
That makes sense.
But the internal stress is building, and eventually it has to collapse. God tells Amos the wall is so out of alignment it can't be patched anymore. He says, I will not again pardon them anymore.
It's past the point of no return.
Yes. And that blindness you mentioned, that illusion of success, leads right into another visual warning in chapter 8, the basket of summer fruit.
Now, I know there is a deeper linguistic layer to this imagery in the original Hebrew.
There is, yeah.
When you read basket of summer fruit in English, it just sounds like a nice picnic, but it's actually a dark warning. Can you explain the wordplay happening there?
This is one of those brilliant linguistic moments that gets completely masked in translation. God shows Amos a basket of beautiful, ripe summer fruit. In Hebrew, the word for summer fruit is kayetz.
Kayetz. Okay.
God asks Amos what he sees, and Amos replies, kayetz. Then God immediately responds, the end is come upon my people. And the Hebrew word for the end is ketz.
Oh, wow. Kites and kets. It's a phonetic pun.
It's a devastating pun, and it works visually, too.
How so?
Ripe summer fruit looks incredibly sweet, beautiful, and desirable on the outside. It represents the absolute peak of the harvest. But what is ripe fruit?
It's about to go bad.
Exactly. It is fruit that is exactly 1 day away from rotting. The society looks prosperous and religious on the outside, but the pun reveals the truth. The internal rot has set in. The society is entirely ripe for destruction, and the ketz, the end, has officially come.
So what does this all mean? When you strip away the ivory beds, the corrupt merchants, and the roaring lions, how are they justifying this?
That's the real mystery, isn't it?
Yeah. How could they go to the temple and worship while simultaneously rigging the scales against the poor?
This raises an important question about how any society measures its own righteousness. In the eyes of the Israelites, they were doing a spectacular job.
Because they were following the rules.
Right. They were bringing sacrifices every morning. They were paying their tithes. They were keeping the festival days perfectly. They assumed their religious rituals essentially bought them a pass for their social and economic exploitation.
Like paying a toll.
Yeah. But Amos delivers what has to be the most worldview-shattering message of the entire book. God absolutely hates their religion.
The text pulls no punches whatsoever. Chapter 5, verse 21. God says, I despise your feasts, and I will take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Yea, though ye offer me burnt offerings, I will not accept them.
It's incredibly strong language.
I want to pause on that because it's massive.
Yeah.
The Israelite religion was literally built on temple sacrifices and festivals. Why would God say he hates the exact rituals he supposedly commanded them to do?
Because rituals devoid of morality are deeply offensive to the God of Amos. The people were using religious ceremonies as a smokescreen to cover up their ethical rot. They would oppress the poor all week. squeeze every penny out of the vulnerable, and then show up at the temple on the Sabbath thinking the smell of a burnt offering made them right with God.
It's totally hypocritical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Amos counters this illusion with the famous resounding thesis statement of the entire book. He says, "But let justice well up as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream."
That is such a powerful, enduring image. A mighty, unceasing stream of justice in how you actually treat other human beings, rather than just the empty, intermittent noise of religious songs and festivals.
That's the core message right there.
And the punishment for ignoring the stream of justice isn't just physical destruction. Amos talks about a famine, but he describes a very specific kind of starvation, right?
Right, in chapter 8, he says, God will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. Think about the psychological terror of that for an ancient society. They will wander from sea to sea, running back and forth, searching for divine guidance, but they won't find it.
Just total silence.
Yeah, because they were entirely deaf to the calls for justice when the prophet spoke. The ultimate consequence is a terrifying divine silence.
If a society reaches a point where there is a famine of hearing, where they are met with total silence, what happens when the crooked wall finally collapses?
That's not pretty good.
That transitions us into the terrifying final chapter. And the sheer scale of the judgment described in chapter 9 sounds like something straight out of an action movie. It's the total impossibility of escape.
Amos describes this inescapable cosmic dragnet. He tells them that even if they manage to dig down into the netherworld, God's hand will pull them out.
Oh, we're safe.
If they try to build a rocket and climb up to heaven, God will bring them down. If they try to camouflage themselves at the very top of Mount Carmel, they will be found.
It's relentless.
And even if they dive to the bottom of the ocean to hide, God will command the sea serpent to bite them. There is absolutely nowhere left to run. The bill has come due.
It is absolute, total devastation. It feels like the book is going to end on this incredibly dark, hopeless note.
But it doesn't.
No, there is this sudden pivot. Right after this terrifying depiction of inescapable judgment, the text shifts into a profound promise of future restoration. It honestly feels jarring, after all, the doom.
It is a profound contrast, but it's essential. The purpose of the plumb line wasn't just to tear down a wall out of anger,
Right.
It was to tear down a crooked wall so that a straight, true one could eventually be built in its place. God promises a rebuilding. He speaks of raising up the tabernacle of David that has fallen and closing up its breaches.
That's a beautiful image.
But what is truly remarkable is the hyperabundance of this future hope.
Yes, the imagery he uses to describe this agricultural restoration in verse 13 is wild. He says, "The plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes him that soweth seed."
Think about the mechanics of agriculture there.
Okay.
The harvest will be so massive, the yield of the land so unimaginably great, that before the workers can even finish bringing in the crops, the next season is already upon them.
That's crazy.
The guy plowing the ground for the new seed is literally stepping on the heels of the guy who is still harvesting the old crop.
I love that.
The mountains shall drop sweet wine. The ruined, waste cities will be completely rebuilt and inhabited, and the people will plant vineyards and eat their own fruit. They will be planted upon their land and no more be plucked up.
It's a complete reversal of the curse. The land that was mourning and withering at the very beginning of the book, the land plagued by locusts and droughts, is now overflowing with stability and life.
It is.
It's a remarkable journey. We start with a farmhand's harsh, unyielding critique of systemic greed. We move through the terrifying roar of inevitable judgment, and we arrive finally at a message of enduring, deeply rooted hope.
It really emphasizes that the judgment, as severe and terrifying as it is depicted, is not the final word. The ultimate goal is restoration and true justice.
That is a lot to chew on. Thank you to everyone listening for joining us on this deep dive. Amos really challenges us to look past our own metaphorical feasts, the things we used to convince ourselves we were doing just fine, and forces us to examine how we're actually treating the most vulnerable people in our communities.
Absolutely.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought from the text that we haven't touched on yet. In the middle of all this shouting, roaring, and prophesying, Amos 5.13 says something surprising. It says, "Therefore the prudent doth keep silence in such a time, for it is an evil time." So as you go about your week, I'd ask you to reflect on that. We all know when things are out of alignment. We all see crooked walls. But when is the right time to speak up and roar like a lion from Tekoa? And when does wisdom require the prudent to simply keep silence?
That is a wonderful, challenging question to leave with. Thank you for listening, everyone. Take care.